papers and all of that, but it didn't really hit me personally until I was working in Alaska, where there was a pretty substantial indigenous population in the town we were at, Barrow, Alaska. And so we were out working on the sea ice, and one of the elders came out. They were actually getting ready for hunting season and whaling and fishing and things. And they were going out and kind of scoping out the sea ice and where they might set up to do, that season's hunt. And he saw us out there working, and he came over, and he was really interested in the science. And we had a whole conversation about the science that was happening and what we were doing and why we were there and what we were sampling. And he started telling stories about how what they do is they dig down into the permafrost. So it's frozen ground. And that's where they store their meat over the winter to keep it frozen. It's built-in freezer, so to speak, without a plug. And so he told us stories about how over the past decade or so, they had lost like half of their meat stores in some seasons because that permafrost was thawing and it warmed the meat, and they had to throw out spoiled meat. And so there were times where the community, they were worried, like they were to the point where they were going to have to ration, right? And so, he told us stories about that, sort of these anecdotal things, right? That everyone says like, oh, that's just a one-off, right? But he had sort of decades of these stories built up. And one of the last things he said when we were out on the sea ice talking was that his people, he said, we can't read the ice anymore. So they have this whole sort of, this knowledge base built up just from experience of, they can tell, like when they're out on the sea ice, that there's a crevasse under that snow. So don't drive your snowmobile over there or you'll fall through, right? Or they can tell when ice is going to break up or when it's getting fragile or when it's forming and really solid, right? Like they just have this experience base that they can see that. So he would say that's what they call reading the ice. So fast forward a year, the same man is out hunting on the tundra, and he takes his snowmobile over a river that's frozen over, and he goes through the ice, and he dies. And that conversation haunts me to this day, because I wonder if it's because he couldn't read the ice. Sorry. So that made it personal for me, because it makes me wonder, we'll never know. We won't have a data measurement to say, oh yeah, that's what happened. But me putting two and two together, I mean, he was in his 70s. Like he knew this area. He grew up there. And it's a trip he would have made year over year over year. And it makes me wonder, is it because we know, river ice and all of that, that's thinning too, just along with everything else. Was there something that day that he misread and thought it was safer than it was? And then he died. He died. So that's one that haunts me. And that's one that makes it personal for me. So.
That's a tough one.